Okay, this is Chapter 12, The Crown of Stones by C.L. Schneider, Magic Price, Book 1 of the series. And C.L. Schneider is the author and the owner with copyrights, and she has authorized this reading. Breaking over the top of the rise, sunshine blazed at my back. Long, warm stream stretched across, bringing light to the neighboring summit and the towering forested bluffs that stretched far beyond my range of sight. In the distance behind me, the echoes of men punctuated the fog as the city woke up and came to life. Closer, at the castle, morning bells rang to mark the guard change at the main gate. My destination was before me, in the sweeping valley below, flanked by sloping hills on three sides and a dense, dark wall of mountain on the fourth. The basin in the middle, Kale's legendary arena, was still mostly in shadows. Sizable enough to accommodate even the largest of tournaments, between contests the field was used for the practice and training of Kale's troops. Typically, a contingent of soldiers could be found owning their skills, or at least a few friends locking swords and wagering on others' talents. Today, however, the arena was all but empty. There were no soldiers, no cheers or clash of metal. There was only a single man and his bow, so completely focused and absorbed in his art that he appeared to have no idea I was here. I watched him a moment and then started Kia down the steep hill. The grass was lush, slippery, and wet with dew. I kept her at a slow pace and used the time to decide if the man was indeed who Moloch sent me to find. It was a quick assessment. Even at a distance, with muted light, I could tell by his brown hair that he wasn't Shinree. He wasn't Kalish either. His weapon was too small. Saren's archers trained with longbows taller than they were. Any trace of Langorian descent was unlikely too, since the man was at least half of Moloch's build, and his skin was substantially lighter. Another clue was his close-fitting white tunic and blue breeches. Both sported a black trim, which conspicuously gave him all of the three Arcana family colors. Then there was his age. Moloch mentioned that the messenger from Cabri was young, and though he was noticeably older than the page I met in the forest, as I drew closer, I gauged him at no more than a smidge or two over 20. Despite that, and his trim, lithe frame, I wasn't mistaking the young man for weak. He drew the string back like it was made of water and sustained the position effortlessly. Motionless, he considered his target. Then, swift and deft, he let loose the first arrow and retrieved another from the quiver on his back. More arrows followed in rapid succession. His concentration was solid. His pivots and adjustments as he changed targets were so slight that the braid hanging down his back seemed not to move at all. The quiver emptied quickly. As he notched the last arrow, he whirled around to face me. It was a single fluid motion, a flawless rotation that brought the point of his weapon to aim dead center of my chest. He didn't release the arrow. He just stood there, poised to shoot me. His entire body was completely relaxed, and I was betting he could hold position, squinting down the length of his arrow at me for hours. Slow and careful, I took my hands off the reins and motioned to the purse at his hip. "I think you're looking for me." There was no reply. Concentration held the messenger's mouth in a grim, hard line. His high brow was scrunched into a low scowl. I imagined if he relaxed long enough to smile, the girls at court would consider his boyish features attractive. In my position, I found his current expression fairly menacing. "Think you can point that somewhere else?" I asked him. "Not really up for digging an arrow out of my chest." Without moving an inch, he said flatly, "I was going for your head." "That does seem to be a popular item lately." His gaze tightened further. Spinning on his heels, the messenger turned and released the arrows. It sailed toward the last target at the very end of the field and kept going, narrowly missing its mark and sinking into the ground at the base of the mountain. Huh! I was surprised he missed. Without a word, he started after his arrow. I slid down from Kia's back and, leaving her at the bottom of the slope, set off across the open arena. The field was vast. I felt small as I walked through it, stepping over painted boundary lines for mock combat, passing groupings of tall, willowy trees meant to give shade to the wooden spectator stands. On the sidelines were colored stalls for merchants to hawk their wares and sturdy fences to keep the audience back. Closer in, laid out in half a circle, were large granite benches where participants could wait their turn or rest between matches. Tossed across one of the benches was a short, light traveling cloak. At the first effigy, I stopped and pulled the arrow out from the man-like figure's straw head. The fletching was the expected black and blue, with the distinct pattern etched into the playing of the arrowhead through me. Cabrinian Archers Guild? I intrigued, I moved on. When I had all 11 arrows, I headed up to the far end of the field where the dark mass of the mountain forest spilled out to meet the edge of the meadow. The messenger was standing there in front of a wall of bramble thick enough to dam a river. You must have influential friends, I said, approaching him. Friends that keep you from being forced into soldiery despite your talent. Fretting over the state of his arrow, he ran a slow finger over the length of it. How does a guild member up as a royal messenger? Or for that matter, how does a courier get admitted to the guild? I glanced down the arrows in my hands. Unless you're that good. Good enough that allow you to choose for yourself. My father was with the army, he said, gently blowing debris from the feather. He never had a choice. He lived and died with a bow in his hand. And you? I was luckier. He dropped the quiver and bow off his shoulder. They slid down his arm in a smooth, natural motion and came to rest in his palm. I've been pulling arrows since I was old enough to know that they were for. And what happened just now? He gave a lazy, one-shouldered shrug and extended his hand. May I? I handed over the arrows I'd collected. He added his and slid all 12 carefully down inside the quiver. The rounded vessel, made of the same soft black leather as his boots, was flaunting a fine, slightly tattered, red silk ribbon. Someone is missing you and Capri, I said, gesturing at the ribbon. Mila gave it to me the night I left. Realizing how that sounded, he blanched. We're friends, he said, a little self-conscious. Old playmates, really. Playmates with a princess of Rella? That's convenient. The messenger's face froze. He looked at me straight on, and I got my first real good look at his eyes. They were a deep shade of blue and expressive, betraying his embarrassment and a clear affection for Rella's heir. My mother was seamstress in the castle, he explained. Neela and I are of similar age, so we used to play together as kids. He donned a sad smile. Sometimes it's hard to remember what she is now. I left it alone. Considering my involvement with Neela's mother, I certainly couldn't judge. I'm told you have a message for me. Yes, of course. He shouldered the bow and quiver again. Digging into the leather purse on his hip, he pulled out the message and handed it to me. After watching me uneasily a moment, he walked away and left me staring at the folded piece of paper in my hand. I ran my fingers over the imprinted wax of a couple times. It had been many years since I'd seen the royal seal of Arcana, but it wasn't a wistful gesture. Knowing that the contents meant for me, it was more like dread. Carefully, I cracked the seal and unfolded the page. Words immediately jumped out. My pulse started pounding, so I stopped and went back to the beginning. I read the whole thing through quickly, and then slower the second time in case I was wrong. By the third time, I couldn't even make it to the end. My eyes were burning, and the words had become too blurry to read. Taking a handful of breaths, I looked up for the messenger. He was sitting on the bench beside his cloak. He met my eyes and knew exactly what I was thinking, that I needed a lot more than Princess Mila Arcana had given me. Crumbling the message in my fist, I came up on him fast. How bad is it? Bad. Cabri? He swallowed once, twice, then lowered his eyes and shook his head. Casualties? Heavy. The Rellan army? Many are dead. Some were taken prisoner. The rest deserted to search for their families. A number of Shinree got out, he said, though not happily. Those damn rebels came in right after the Langorians and raided the slave camps. They didn't help put out the fires or fight with us. They just took their people and left us to die. What about the rest of the realm? I don't know. The villages? The southern cities? I don't know. Capri's harbor? Dropping the bow and quiver off his shoulder, he slammed it down on the bench. What do you want me to say, Troy? The city's a husk, a black shell. Our enemy was very thorough, and those that aren't dead wish they were. I closed my eyes briefly. I don't understand. How could this happen? I was hoping you would know. No one thought he would ever recover from what you did. Now, out of nowhere, he has an army? It doesn't make any sense. The first line of Neela's message echoed in my head. Draken has risen. The fourth line told of his men storming the castle and defiling the catacombs. Though Neela made no mention of it, I knew exactly what they were after. Draken has the crown of stones, doesn't he? Yes. and to Shinree to use it for him. We assume so. Draken made reference to a magic user, but we never saw one. We're still trying to figure out how he learned the crown's location in the first place. Even Neela didn't know it was in the crypt with... He hesitated. I didn't think he was going to say it. Elegar. It was amazing. How, after all this time, the sound of her name was still a blow to my chest. It was a penetrating, self-inflicted ache, but it wasn't as bad as the tension in me. That was down deep, stuck in, and buried like a hook. And the knowledge of the massacre and Cabri of Rella's need was pulling it taut, pulling me back. I rubbed at the pain. I heard Rayan, Arcana is dead. Is that true? Visibly, the messenger shrunk for my question. Is King Rayan dead? I asked again. His eyes dropped to the ground. Leaning over, elbows on knees, head in hands, he drew in deep, ragged breaths, as if my question made it hard for him to breathe. Draken's men, he said, starting slow. They rounded up everyone in the castle. They put us in the hall and then ransacked the place. We could hear them. They destroyed everything. They forced us to watch as they stripped our king naked. They tied him, whipped him, beat him until I couldn't recognize his face. Then they dumped him on the floor so he could see his people die. The king's personal guards were beheaded. Servants were picked at random and butchered. The women were... Pausing, he tried to smooth the pain from his voice. They were used badly. The princess. Was she injured? No. Draken held her. He wouldn't let her look away. Those of us that were left, we fought back. We tried to stop it. I tried to reach her and the king, but the bastards clubbed one of us that moved. And they were so damn strong. I tried, he said again, apologetically, as if the entire thing were his fault. After a while, I just couldn't get up. It's best you stayed down. If you'd gotten up, they would have killed you too. It wasn't by choice. Dropping his hands, the messenger burrowed his fingers into the edge of the stone bench and glared at me. Couldn't get up because they broke my fucking legs. I had to lie there and listen to Neela scream while Draken's soldiers gutted King Rayan and pissed in his blood. They cut him open, defiled him, and we didn't do a damn thing to stop it. We let him die. His blue eyes fixed on me, so full of dark emotion they were hard to look at. I let him die. The anguish on his face and in his voice made me cringe. It was hard listening to the explicit details of Draken's attack, but it was much worse bearing witness to such agonizing personal grief over the death of Rella's king and being unable to muster even an ounce of our own. Despite the fact that Rayan, Arcana, allowed me to be born, that he afforded me no punishment for the loss of his army or his wife, and that it was by his grace alone that I enjoyed freedom, conditional as it was. I didn't see him as the younger messenger did, the esteemed sovereign ruler of Rella. I saw him as I first knew him, as the man that relieved the tensions of his kinship in my mother's bed. His use of her right up until the day she died was blatant, as was his misuse of his own wife, Elegar. He had no regard for either of them, and that alone left me with far less sympathy for the death of King Rayan, somehow I know in all my life, than the man I just met who watched him die. Pensively, the messenger shook his head. A few Shinree were left in the city. One of them put my legs back together. I've never had a spell like that done on me before. It was strange. All that pain. And then I woke up and felt good, almost like it never happened. Except these were piles of black bodies. And I couldn't forget the king's face. Fingers tapping fitfully on his knees. The muscles in his jaw started twitching. I'd never seen him like that before. His eyes were so wide and afraid. He looked at me. He looked right at me. It was like he was trying to tell me something. After what they did to him, I doubt the king was even seeing you at all. Quiet a moment, he lifted one shoulder up in a shrug and let out a short, dismissive grunt. Yeah, probably right. But saying that brought him no comfort. Not that I could imagine that would for a while. Deep, angry lines had settled in to age the messenger's young face, and his eyes were fierce, hardened by the horror and shame of being unable to save the person he pledged his life to. It was like looking into a mirror. "What's your name, kid?" I said. "Jared." He cleared his throat and stood up. "Kane," he added, retrieving his cloak from the bench. As he put it on and fastened it, I noticed the clasp, made of solid sunstone, bore a carved miniature version of the iconic crest on its face. The same design, made of brass, adorned the flap of his purse. Likely more examples of Jared Kane's loyalty were on his person or his belongings. If I were to look, clearly his duty to the realm were a source of pride. Now, thanks to Drake, and it was a source of pain. There's been no word out of Rella since, Jared said, then picking up his bow. What was the situation when you left? Kabru was heavily occupied. We were prisoners in our own home. 3 of us snuck out with identical messages. I was the only one that made it off the island. The Langorians followed me for a while, but I managed to find high ground and pick them off. Taking up his quiver full of arrows, he looked at me. King Saren is going to ask you to stay and protect Kale. Is Draken expected to come this far? I don't know. Jared started moving. I joined him and we headed toward the edge of the arena. But we should leave for Rella as soon as possible. Saren has been good to me. I should hear him out first. We stopped at the base of the slope where Kia was grazing. She gave Jared a good sniff and he ran a hand over her mane. King Saren's aware of your permanent obligation to Rella. He should know you can't stay. Jared's words irked me. I didn't realize my obligation was so well known. The nature of your service was never the secret the Arcanas wanted it to be. Besides, even if the truth is unknown to Saren, he's at least heard the rumor. What rumor? That your mother's pregnancy was unplanned? That Valoria Troy begged King Rayan for the life of her unborn child, and when that didn't work, she threatened to give you over to Langor. King feared that greatly. He agreed to your birth on the condition that you were made harmless to the realm. So a Shinree was found to do the binding spell, and you were born compelled to defend Rella from her enemies whenever summoned. To do otherwise would bring you instant death. I hadn't heard that one, I said awkwardly, shocked by Jared's bluntness. Doesn't matter. You'd come back to free even without the spell. And why is that? It's the only way you'll find absolution. I took a step back. Absolution? For the lives you took to stop the war, he said, still being blunt. For the husbands and fathers, the sons and brothers that died. If there's any forgiveness to be had for their sacrifice, it would be found on Rella's shores, not here in Kale. With gritted teeth, I held back the curse on my tongue. I wanted to let it out and drop the young fool for simply having too much nerve, but impudence had nothing to do with Jared Kane's words. His tone had been too level, too emotionless for disrespect. His face, even now, was completely without spite or disdain. No judgment shone in his eyes. No contempt or resentment strained his voice. His speech, difficult as it had been to hear, had been about laying blame or condemnation. It hadn't been to accuse me of his father's death either, and given what I'd heard of the man's end, my involvement was likely. Jared had merely stated the facts as he saw them, honestly and brutally, and for the life of me, I couldn't understand why. His outright acceptance of those facts, his tolerance of my actions that even I couldn't tolerate, was so baffling it drained the anger right out of me. Unclenching my fist, I pushed the balled-up message in my pocket. Let's go. I moved around him to grab the reins, and the hairs on my arm stood straight up. Kia's mane lifted away from her neck. The air tightened and the grass rippled beneath my boots. You feel that? It rippled again, stronger, and the vibration shot all the way up my legs. Whoa, Jared cried out. I shoved Kia's reins in his hand. Stay here. Leaving him, I moved back across the field. As I walked, the ground rumbled. I watched it, listening. It wasn't a quake. I knew all too well what a normal shift of the land felt like, and this wasn't it. For one thing, the motion was too localized. It was contained within the valley and only happening in certain spots. The leaves on the trees were still. The grass swayed gently. It was almost as if the disturbance was deeper, far under the surface, as if the ground wasn't moving. It's not, I thought. Something's moving beneath it. I sprinted back to Jared. Where's your horse? I walked. Seemed like a nice day. Not anymore. The obsidian at my neck began to warm and I stopped. Get to Kia. The shard began to glow. Go as far and as fast as you can and don't stop. Jared took a step in my direction. Ian, what's going on? Power pushed against my skin and I shouted, Go! Now! Or I will kill you.